Yeah, but you see with a lot of pop and rock stars, they once they reach 40 or something, then they finally settle down a bit. How come Mick hasn't settled down?
Well, for a long time we didn't have that phrase, sex addiction. Now it's recognised, but it just used to be what pop stars did for a long time. And as I mentioned, Casanova, he's equated with Casanova, but he went on long after Casanova, having many women friends. And also this license to do what he wanted to do as a rock god. He would risk his domestic situation with Jerry Hall and his children by these casual flings in a sort of way that you can't understand how someone so intelligent could have done that, except he was like an eternal child who didn't think the grown-ups could see him. It's like small children don't think they can be seen as they break a window or torture the cat.
It's strange if you say that normally he's more cautious.
Yeah, but in that particular case he took horrendous risks and was very public about it.
So he has a sex addiction. So you think he has a sex addiction?
Well, I can't say. I mean, I'm not privy to his medical records, but there seem to be the signs of it, yes. But then it wasn't called that in those days. It was called being a pop star.
And is he faithful now?
Well, again, I can't tell you. He seems to have been in a stable relationship for about 10 years with one woman. But neither of them gives any sort of commitment. Each of them don't hardly admit that they're seeing each other.
The two women who actually tried to commit suicide when they were in a relationship with Mick Jagger, how come?
The first one was his first serious girlfriend, who he was going to get married to, and he was engaged to, Chrissy Shrimpton, whose sister was Jean Shrimpton, the model. That was the sort of brutality with which she was just dropped by Mick. And they had a good relationship, and before that, and quite a long one. With Marianne Faithfull, who was the other one, who tried to commit suicide in Australia just after the Hyde Park concert in 1969. That wasn't, I mean, Mick had been, she says Mick had been very good to her as she was trying to stop herself sliding into addiction. He tried to help her not become addicted. Lots of other things were going on. She was taking heroin. Brian Jones had just died. Huge pressure all around.
So it's nothing to do with Mick then, in both cases?
Yes, it was a direct consequence of being Mick's girlfriend, but it wasn't like he drove either of them to suicide, in a sort of calculated way.
Calculated way by him?
It wasn't calculated, no, it was circumstantial.
I don't understand.
You can't say that life with Mick drove both of these women to suicide or to attempt suicide. Marianne Faithfull felt she could never get through to him because he was too much of a star. But they still had very happy times together. She was very good for him. She was an intellectual person, and she turned him on to a lot of art and literature and ballet and that sort of thing. Chrissy Shrimpton was very young and wanted to get married and wanted to have a family with Mick, and just couldn't cope with suddenly losing him.
His first child, he didn't want to pay child support.
Yes, he's a mass of contradictions, and he can behave very well, or he can behave not very well. And the child he had with Marcia Hunt, who was an actress and living in London at the time, he first of all seemed to want to have the child. Then he wanted to be a sort of parent, but at one remove, and then didn't want to pay maintenance.
How come?
Just didn't want to give up the money. But again, it was a strange change of heart somehow, because he seemed to want to have a child with her, and then suddenly. But that's another thing. That's the prerogative of rock stars who don't grow up. You can't predict them. 1 minute they seem quite pleasant, the next minute they're being completely horrible. They don't feel they have to control their behaviour.
Then there are certain glimpse of maybe him being some sort of homosexual at certain points in his life?
I don't think that's ever serious. Someone who has been so incredibly heterosexual over so many years. I mean, there wasn't any time apart from anything else. It was always said possibly between him and, Brian Jones, who was also very, very heterosexual as well, and possibly between him and Andrew Oldham, who used to pretend to be camp and a bit gay in his mannerisms. But he's been too busy chasing women.
And Bowie?
That story has been around so many years and not a scrap of proof, and both of them denied it.
So you think it's not the case?
I think it's not the case, and I don't think it's very interesting.